Welcome to Arise, Achieve Resilience, Inspiration, and Self-Empowerment, a speaker series presented by Vision Loss Alliance of New Jersey. Tonight, we are honored to have with us Lonnie Bedwell, motivational speaker, blind adventure athlete, military veteran, author, and the 2015 National Geographic Adventure of the Year. A former Navy petty officer, Lonnie was critically injured in a 1997 hunting accident that instantly took his sight. Nevertheless, he raised 3 daughters as a single father, teaching them all to hunt and fish, and against all odds, teaching them to drive. Lonnie continues to challenge himself, ultimately becoming a renowned extreme sports athlete. He has kayaked some of the most challenging white water in the world and is best known for having completed the first blind descent of the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. Before we move on to tonight's amazing adventure, let us review the Zoom protocol. At the end of Lonnie's presentation, he will open the floor for questions. So at that time, we ask that you use the raise your hand feature. So let's review. For those of you who dialed in, the raise your hand feature is *9. *6 will mute and unmute you, giving you the opportunity to ask a question. If you are on a computer, Alt-Y, raise your hand. Alt-A is the mute and unmute command. Using the Zoom app on the iPad, top right, select the More option on the top of the screen and flick down to Raise Hand. On the iPhone, this feature is located at the bottom of the screen on the right-hand side. Tonight, we will hear a personal, powerful story of overcoming adversity as it relates to teamwork, leadership, and motivation. And now it is my honor to introduce to you Mr. Lonnie Bedwell. Welcome, Lonnie.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you all for tuning in and listening. So, yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and jump right into my story here or into the little bit
right
in the presentation. Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of funny, you know, the Vision Loss Alliance. I appreciate everything you guys do, by the way, and reaching out and helping and assisting others. And you know, I tell people all the time, though, in my opinion, I lost eyesight, but I personally think I gained vision. And I truly believe I have more vision now than I did when I had my eyesight, and a lot of aspects within that. But to kind of jump into my presentation a little bit, you know, there's another Navy veteran named David Mickelson. He's a bilateral amputee. He's missing one leg above the knee and one leg below the knee. And he often said, or he says 3 things. He said, you know, life is not a spectator sport. He said, you know, you have to get engaged. And every day that you get up, you have to figure out how to challenge yourself, as if he's not, you know, got enough challenges the way it is, or if we don't, if you will. Then I think the most profound thing he said to me, or that I heard, was that, you know, you can't sit around and wait on silver linings. You have to go out and create them. And in doing so throughout life, it's just funny. I distinctly remember, you know, standing on the banks of the Zambezi River over in Africa, just below Victoria Falls. When I got into a conversation with a local Zambian man over there, just after we completed kayaking the Potomac Gorge section of the Zambezi River over there. And he told me, he said, you know, Lonnie, over here, we don't teach the blind. We simply have them stand on the corner and beg. You know, and I thought, beg? Do they really think we're that irrelevant? No value, no purpose? Or was he letting me know that he was able to refocus his mind and see somebody like me or like us from another perspective? And I truly do believe that it's just this simple as changing the lens on the camera. If we're willing to refocus our mind and expand our sense of vision, that vision that's within us, our heart, our mind, our soul, our spirit, it's then that we can see outside the box beyond the status quo. And we can turn dreams into reality and achieve the perceived impossible. As I go through my presentation, there's going to be slides pretty much following everything I talk about, and pictures and photos and videos. So the description of some of those, just for example, there's a picture up there probably right now that shows the Potomac Gorge section of the Zambezi River and the people standing along the riverbanks. But as I go along and I talk about my story, there's going to be photos and videos of me, or like in the military, or doing the things I'm talking about. And I won't describe every one of them, but hopefully I'll think about it as I go through this and describe a little bit about what some of them are anyway. So anyway, to go on with my story, it began in the little town of Pleasantville, Indiana. Population 120, if you count the dogs and the chickens. And I live right close to that right now. I'm about 6 miles from where I was raised at. And after high school and a couple of years of college, I decided to join the military, as you've heard, and I enlisted in the Navy as a nuclear-powered machinist mate. And then I volunteered and was selected for submarine service. And little did I know at the time how performing all those missions and just drill after drill after drill after drill within the confines of that little submarine, sometimes in the dark, how it was going to prepare me for the next chapter of my life. And that chapter began on May the 4th of 1997. And that was a day that I'll never forget. I'm sure each and every one of you guys have had days or moments in your life, other than our blindness, that or loss of vision, days or moments in your life that you can't forget and possibly wish you could change. Well, that definitely, as you know, is a day I obviously can't forget, and I want to repeat that, was a day that I wish I could have changed. And it was a day that I was accidentally shot by a good friend of mine while turkey hunting. I took a full shotgun blast to the face at about 9 steps. And I remember getting up onto my knees, my head just ringing and pounding. And once I got up onto my knees, I reached up and I wiped my eyes, simply because I thought I had something covering my face. Puzzled when I still couldn't see, I took my gloves off and I reached up and I slowly wiped them again. Only this time, as I felt the blood running down my hands, I realized what had happened. And I knew that I was, quote unquote, once again in the dark. Only this time, perhaps forever. My buddy picked me up and he took me and he leaned me against a tree and he took his finger and he stuck it in my mouth to clean my airway so I could take a breath, and then he ran for help. And I immediately began to burn the images of my 3 beautiful daughters into my mind. Courtney, Ashley, Taylor, which there's a picture of them up there now, from oldest to youngest, better known to me as Court, Peanut, and Bug. I never wanted to forget what they looked like. And, I knew that I had to survive, not only for them, but also for me and my bud. That I was in the accident, I knew that I was going to have to be there to help him let go of what had happened, or a lifetime of friendship would not only be lost for him and I, but for our entire families. Our parents were raised together, our brothers and our children that were raised together. And, it's just, I didn't want those friendships to be lost. And thankfully I can say they weren't. And I can honestly say, well, my buddy, he was going through his life, fighting with his anger and bitterness over what had happened. I can say that I never was the slightest bit angry or bitter at him. And, I just wanted him to forget about it. I knew it, it was an accident. But I can also honestly tell you that I've told him numerous times that he's much better looking to me now than he used to be. And so, but I can think about that too. While I was sitting there helping him kind of let go of his emotions, I was kind of unaware at the time how foolish pride, fear, and pity started to creep into my life. And I distinctly remember lying on my couch here at home, the home I still live in right now. I was in there in the living room, lying on my back with my left foot on the floor, just fighting back tears as I thought once again, was thinking about those three beautiful girls. How am I going to be daddy? What do these girls think of me? How am I going to do anything? I had the same mindset that I heard that someone else had said they had when they lost their eyesight, that they were afraid that the next step they took would tip them off the end of the world until they took that step and the world was still there. My left foot on the floor, I was tapping the floor like, okay, it's still there. And this was just a couple of months after the accident. And I finally thought, okay, I got enough strength to get up and go outside and do something. And I had went from 181 pounds down to about 129 pounds, drinking Ensure shakes like they were candy. And I didn't have any mobility training at the time, but I got up and I went right over here to the closet and I took the handle out of the broom. And I turned, I went right out my back door. A few steps into the grass, I was completely lost. But I kept moving, just sweeping that broom out in front of me, similar to how we do our canes. And I kept going across the yard and I ran into the edge of my little field and the weeds, they were up to my chest. So I turned and I started going down the edge of that field and I kind of sensed something out in front of me. So I took that broomstick and I reached out way out in front of me, took a few steps out into that field and I hit my little bitty barn. I just lowered my head again, fought back more tears, turned around, and I started going back up across the yard. And then I ran into my youngest daughter, Bug. And she looked up at me and she said, Daddy, she said, what's wrong? And I told her, I said, nothing, Bug. She said, yeah, there is. What's wrong? I told her, I said, well, if you got to know, girl, I'm just a little frustrated. I heard her stomp her foot. And she deepened her voice, and I guarantee she was standing there in her rubber boots and her sundress, her sunglasses on, her ball cap on backwards. And I heard her stomp her foot, and as she deepened her voice, and she said, Daddy, why are you frustrated? And I'm like, whoa, it's like I'm getting called out by a 5-year-old here. So I was like, well, I said, girl, I said, if you got to know, it's because I can't get into that barn over there without walking through chest-high weeds, and I can't see to mow them. And she didn't even hesitate hardly. And she said, well, Daddy, she said, I'll help you. I'm like, what? She said, I'll help you, Daddy. In my mind, it's just racing. I'm sitting there thinking, you're 5 and I'm blind. There's no way. And, I'm supposed to be helping you, not you helping me. And, what if you get hurt or what if I can't? All these what ifs just racing through my mind. And all of a sudden I heard these words that said, trust me. You can do it. Trust me. And I know that little girl didn't say it, but I heard it clear as day. So I looked down at her and I said, okay, girl, if you got the guts, I said, take my hand and lead me to the garage. She took that finger right there, walked me around the house, into the garage, and we jumped on the riding lawnmower, fired it up, and out the door we went. All of a sudden, she said, stop. I said, what's wrong? She said, the truck. I said, where is it? She said, right there. I just kind of chuckled, but okay, where is right there? So I thought for a second. I said, okay, point at it. And she did, and I felt her little arm. So I thought, okay. I turned the wheel, I backed up, turned the wheel the other way, and we drove around the truck. Then we dodged a tree and we dodged the fuel tank, and she drove me right out to that little barn. I shut the lawnmower off, and I had her go back up to the house and I had her watch. Then I fired the lawnmower back up. I engaged the blades, took my left hand, I put it on the barn. I thought, okay, there you are. I mowed a lap. I took that broomstick and I held it against the barn. I mowed a second, then I held it all the way out and I mowed a third. When I shut the lawnmower off, I could hear up the house just jumping around and squealing. I walked straight up to her and I heard her saying, "You did it, Daddy, you did it. I knew you could do it. I knew you could do it." I picked her up, I gave her a big hug and I said, "You're right." I said, "I love you." Only now, instead of fighting back tears, I had tears of hope just flowing off my face. And I knew right then and there that I was still Daddy. And to those girls, I was the man. And, you know, those girls, they changed my vision more than the loss of my eyesight ever did. And they allowed me to see that light in the darkness. And they were telling me, you know, they said, "Get up, Daddy, and stand up. Get up, Daddy, and step. Get up, Daddy, because you can. And we need you." So before long, they had me doing a lot of things I used to do, only with a little help and a little differently. But it began, you know, by me, push mowing around my outbuildings and around the pond. And I'll never forget, I was outside well after dark one night, and I was mowing the bank between the pond and the road. And I heard a car pull up and honk its horn. So I shut the lawnmower off. And my neighbor, she rolled her window down. She said, "Lonnie," she said, "do you realize you're mowing in the dark?" I thought, well, here's your sign, you know. And then, you know, I went and got a chainsaw. My dad took all my chainsaws away from me after I lost my eyesight. But my mom took me to get another one, which really shocked me. But I got a chainsaw and I started cutting firewood and clearing fence rows again. Then I went horseback riding and fishing again with my brother and my cousins. And while I'm going through these things I'm talking about, there's pictures showing me mowing and using a chainsaw and stuff. And then I went hunting again the very next year with the guy I was in the accident with, only he was my guide. Only now I have him sit right beside me so I can keep an eye on him. And then a few years after that, I started teaching my daughters how to drive, as you heard in the introduction. And it started out in that little back pasture behind the house. Now, I had an old Ford F-150 four-wheel drive pickup truck. And I'd put them on my lap and I'd put it in four-wheel low. I'd roll the window down so I could hear how fast the grass was going past and the rev of the engine. And I'd sit there and I did the brake and the gas and shifted the gears and let them steer. And as we got better and better, you know, one of them would shift the gears and the other would steer. And then as they grew up a little bit more and they got better, I'd just let them get behind the wheel and they started doing everything. And then we took off going down the county roads. And whenever they really got good enough, occasionally I jumped behind the wheel and take my turn driving. You know, it'd be kind of funny because as we go along, you know, they might just say, you know, "Stop sign's coming up a little bit, stop," you know, but we did it. But just, you guys can keep that in mind if you're ever driving around Indiana and out there in Richmond, Virginia. One of my daughters lives out there now. There's a person out there taught how to drive by a blind guy. So, but then I got into building houses, something I didn't do before I lost my eyesight. And now I do anything from framing to sheeting to wiring to roofing and the whole 9 yards. And I've helped build over 30 homes, numerous decks, garages, just roofing jobs, and just so much. I do all the electrical wiring for these folks whenever I work on the houses. And one of my favorite stories too is I've been asked so many times now by people who see me on a roof for the first time. You know, they'll come by and they're like, "Lonnie, what are you doing on a roof?" You know, my standard answer now is, "I'm on a roof, help!" You know, but it works. But I think about this, you know, and I think about, you know, if it wasn't for my daughters, teaching me to humble myself, to swallow some of that foolish pride. You know, there's none of us ever got to where we're at in life without somebody helping us, teaching us, guiding us along the way, you know, and there's nothing wrong with asking for a hand up, not a hand out. You know, so to humble myself, to face that fear, and to quit feeling sorry for myself. Where might I be today? You know, they taught me that blindness, just like everything in my past, where I'm from, how I'm raised, the time in the military, all of it's a part of me. But blindness alone doesn't define me. The only way it defines me is if I allow it to. And they taught me and my buddy that if we're truly going to move forward in life, we have to let go of all those negative emotions that are holding us back. You know, and Dr. Nito Kubain, he's the president of High Point University down in North Carolina. He often says that, you know, adversity provides opportunity. And if it wasn't for May the 4th of 1997, I wouldn't have had the privilege and the honor of talking to you guys today or living the next chapter of my life. And that chapter began somewhere around 2010, 2011, the end of 2010, 2011, when I went to the VA Blind Rehab Center up in Chicago, Illinois. I never went to a blind rehab center until my youngest daughter graduated high school, since I was a single father. And while I was up there, you know, they asked me, they said, Lonnie, we know blind people snow ski, but we've never done it here as a recreational sport. And we've got all these younger veterans coming back, and we'd like to try it. Said, will you be our guinea pig? And I thought, okay. I said, twist my arm. If they can do it, we can do it. And snow skiing, it started for me up on a little bunny hill up in Wilmot, Wisconsin. And there's going to be pictures and a little video being shown here of me snow skiing. And while I went up to Wilmot, Wisconsin on this little bunny hill, like I said, they told me, said, hold on to this tow rope. When you get to the top, let go. Well, this tow rope goes around a pulley that's attached to the pole. You know, as I was hanging onto that rope, my knees wobbling back and forth, the next thing I know, I face plant that pole. I end up falling onto the ground. I set up laughing. I said, hey, Adaptive 101, how about telling the blind guy when he gets to the top? So the snow skiing then led me out to Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And it was the 5th day I was ever on a set of skis in my life. And we were skiing along on one of these little flat green trails, cut through trails, kind of like a bunny hill. And I heard a clicking noise out in front of me. And somebody, and I asked my guides what it was, and they told me it was somebody tapping their ski poles together. So I thought, okay. I said, let's try that. Can we try it out on the slopes ourselves? So we went out there and we tried it, and I couldn't really hear the clicking noise. It wasn't loud enough. So they went and they got a whistle, and they started blowing this whistle out in front of me, and I couldn't echolocate it. Plus, you know, it exhausted the guides going down the slopes. So they went and they got a pipe and a bar, and they started beating it together out in front of me. And it worked. So after lunch, they went and they got a cowbell, and they started ringing that cowbell out in front of me. And you guys know, and I'm sure some of you guys have snow skied and maybe not. And the traditional way for snow skiing, a lot of times with blind and visually impaired folks, is for them to just simply ski behind you and give you voice commands, you know, and right, and hold, and left, and hold, something similar to that. But with that cowbell ringing out in front of me, I was able to focus downhill. And I went from scared, you know, with a little innovation, you know, I went from skiing those little green slopes and bunny hills, if you will, to skiing my very first blue slope, which is a little steeper, to my very first black slope that day. And me and one of my guides, we were clocked slightly over 60 miles an hour out in Aspen, Colorado, with me chasing the cowbell down the mountain.
Feel that core hasn't been started since December or something like that. Good luck.
And I think about that, and for me, if there's any Saturday Night Live fans in the group, I need more cowbell, and and for me personally, with the snow skiing, with that sound in front of me, I feel confident that if that sound went there, I can go there. And it just really opened it up for me, being totally blind doing that. But the snow skiing then led me to an event out in Snowmass, Colorado, where I was introduced to, mountaineering and rock climbing and kayaking. And, this was just a little mountaineering up in the mountain there in Colorado, and rock climbing was on a fake wall, and the kayaking began in a little swimming pool. And now I'm going to show in some of the slides, it's going to show some pictures of me doing some mountaineering. And excuse me, it's going to show a little bit of stuff where I started in Colorado, and then it's going to show pictures of of Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, and then it's going to show a couple of pictures of Mount Aconcagua down in South America. But the mountaineering, it started there in Colorado and climbing one of the 14,000-foot peaks. And on one of my first climbs, I was joined by a friend of mine who lost his eyesight in Afghanistan. And after climbing out there in Colorado, we decided to go try and climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which is the highest peak in Africa. But just before we were to go over there, just a few weeks before we were to go over there, he developed spinal meningitis, which took his hearing, leaving him not only blind, but deaf. And the only way we could communicate with him was to spell letter by letter in his hand at the time. And I'll never forget, I was on the telephone talking to his caregiver who was sitting beside him there while he was in the hospital. And I told him, I said, you tell him that I'm not going to go climb until he can climb with me. And I heard him repeating every letter as they were spelling it in his hand. And then he was repeating the words. And then all of a sudden he yelled, no, 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 no. He said, Lonnie, he said, you climb it for me. He said, you climb it for us. You climb it for all of us, meaning each and every one of us. And I was just shocked. Here he was in total silence, in total darkness. And he still shared a vision that we had. It was much more than just him and I standing on top of a mountain. We truly wanted to prove the unlimited potential that's in each and every one of us, and that there's hardly nothing beyond us if we'll simply unite for a common goal. So I knew then that I had to go ahead and try to carry out this vision. So I boarded a plane to Africa to climb with people from all walks of life, all different ages, a man missing a foot, another with a traumatic brain injury, and a Navy SEAL by the name of Oz, who was climbing on behalf of a fallen comrade. And when I got over there, I told them the story about my buddy lying back in that hospital bed, and the story of another friend of ours who lost his eyesight in Iraq. And I told them, I said, guys, gals, I said, no matter what, I've got to get to the top of this mountain and get 2 little rocks, one for each of those guys. And I was simply amazed how instantly united that group. Each and every one of them insisted on taking their turn guiding me up that mountain. And I'll never forget Oz, he told me, he said, Lonnie, he said, you'll get to the top of this mountain. I guarantee you. If I have to carry you, you'll get to the top. And then we started up the mountain, up through the jungle, And there's a picture of the jungle there now. We started up through the jungle where they described the vast green foliage, and I just longed to hear the monkeys cry. And then we went up through the meadows where our porters were yelling, "Pole, pole," which means slow, slow in Swahili. And I could smell the flowers. And every time I got a new guide, it was like putting a new lens on my mind by the way they described things. And then we climbed the 800-foot breakfast wall. And there's a picture showing right now of this wall. We climbed up the wall and we woke up the next morning and they described to me how the fog looked like a huge pillow or blanket covering the peaks and the valleys below. And there's a picture of that in there as well. And as that fog rose, it lifted, it engulfed us. And then we passed the glacier field on our left until we reached the summit at 19,341 feet. And there's a picture of us right now shown on the summit. But as I was standing there on the summit, I heard someone say, "Lonnie, hold out your hand." I held my hand out. And in it, they placed 2 little rocks. And then just a few years ago, I was joined by another guy who lost his eyesight in Iraq when we went down to climb Mount Aconcagua in South America. And there's some photos of us and of Mount Aconcagua that's going to be shown right now as well. But we went down to climb Mount Aconcagua. And I'll not forget, as we started climbing Mount Aconcagua, the footing was just horrible. You know, the rocks were all round like softballs and volleyballs and about that size, and the footing was just difficult. And then as we climbed, I was thinking, man, there's no way we're ever going to get to the top of this mountain if the footing's like this the entire way. Then as we got into it a couple of days, the footing was better, but there were some places where, the exposure was thin, and you passed through a little about, 1.5 to 2 foot wide area. And if you fell, you was going to fall a couple of 100 feet. Then we got up to the midsection, which the footing, about 15,000 feet to about 19,000 feet. The footing was good. The terrain was good, but just the altitude. And then I'll not forget, from 19,000 feet up to the summit, I was probably the coldest I ever was in my life. As we went up and we went across this traverse, across this peak, there was about a 40-mile-an-hour wind blowing off a glacier. And it was just bitterly cold. And I'll not forget, when we got to the summit, this summit was 22,841 feet high. I reached down and I picked up 2 more little rocks. And I think Helen Keller said it the best when she said, the only thing worse than being blind is having eyesight with no vision. And to add to that, from my perspective is, and there's been others, I think, say something similar, but, vision is nothing more than a dream unless we do something to turn it into reality. So along with the mountaineering, I got into rock climbing. And it took me back to a dream I had when I was stationed out in Idaho Falls, Idaho. As I drove back and forth across eastern Wyoming to visit my parents back here in Indiana, I could see Devil's Tower off in the distance. And Devil's Tower is our nation's first national monument. And there's some pictures of Devil's Tower up there right now. Devil's Tower was our nation's first national monument. And it's in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, for those of you who might have seen that movie and could see it. And, I always wondered, if people climbed it, and if so, how, and what it would feel like to be up there. And I told this dream to a climbing friend of mine. And he said, "Lonnie," "let's just make it happen. Let's get you up there." And the rock climbing also, it took me back to a level of trust I hadn't experienced since I was in the military, because I was truly not only putting my life in someone else's hands, they were literally putting theirs in mine. So we drove up there and we got to the base of the monument. And then we had to hike and scramble up over these rocks and boulders to get to the base of the route we were going to take to the top. And it was, well, like I said, about 800 vertical feet. And my buddy looked up and he saw that, you know, it's kind of what they call crack climbing. And that's where you have to take and you have to jam your hands and feet into these crevices or your whole body to make the moves to climb up, instead of just reaching up and grabbing hold of formations and going up. So since he seen I was going to have to be doing this, he made these makeshift gloves out of tape for me. You know, I just literally took this medical tape and wrapped it around my fingers and around my hand, so I wouldn't just destroy my hands as I was climbing up. And then, you know, I put on my climbing shoes and my harness and a little backpack that had a few snacks and a few lightweight layers of clothing, and I put my helmet on. And my backpack might have weighed, I don't know, 3 or 4 pounds. And my buddy, you know, he put on this huge backpack with all this extra safety gear, a headlamp so we could see if it got dark, and which, you know, wasn't going to do me any good. But and he had these 270-meter ropes and this huge rack of climbing gear, and it all probably weighed 60 or 70 pounds. So tell me, guys, that there's not advantages to us being blind. Then he started describing to me, you know, how to properly position my hands and feet, and then, you know, how to clear the gear as I came up behind him and attach it to myself so I could give it back to him for the next pitch up. And he made sure I knew how to blame or catch him should he fall, even though I'd done it several times before in the gym. And then move by move, step by step, inch by inch, we started up the wall. Everything I touched, I was painting this portrait in my mind. And I'll never forget, I went up this one chimney section, and there's a picture of this right now being shown. I went up this one chimney section where I had my feet, and a chimney section, if you guys will, is just literally like the chimney on your house. You know, it can be 3-sided or it could literally be 4-sided and hollow up the middle. So as I was going up this one chimney section, I had my feet on one side and my hands and back on the other side, just wedging and pushing my way up. And then we crossed over and we started going up a second chimney section where I almost passed out, and it was my own fault, because I knew I was burning all this fuel, but I wasn't replenishing it. I wasn't eating or drinking, even though my buddy told me to do so. But I wasn't doing it because I was pushing so hard, not only because my buddy trusted me to make the moves and clear the gear, catch him should he fall, but I was pushing so hard simply because he believed in me. He believed in me. He believed in me so much that he had me lead the final pitch to the top. Excuse me for a second. He had me lead the final pitch to the top. And when I got to the top, I inadvertently put my hand on a cactus. And I gave out a little bit of yelp, and you know, as I was sitting there telling my buddy what had happened and pulling the cactus needles out of my hand, he kind of chuckled and laughed. He said, "Congratulations, Lonnie B, you made it." You know, but it's the way he laughed that since he'd climbed it before, I think he knew that I was going to find one of those cactus up there. As I stood up there, I distinctly remember, you know, thinking, you know, never give up on a dream. Never give up on a dream. And I guarantee the portrait that I painted had much greater depth and detail than if I'd have done it 30 years ago with eyesight. And it made me recall the words of Warren Buffett when he said, "Trust is like the air that we breathe. When it's there, nobody notices. When it's not there, everybody notices." You know, and the rock climbing also, just a few months ago, excuse me, took me out to Oregon to a place called Smith Rock. And Smith Rock has a tower that's just off the mainland, if you will, just it stands there alone. And we took and we ran a rope from the mainland over to this tower. And they call it a Tyrolean Traverse, where you just slide across this rope, hanging underneath this rope, and slide across it to go across. And from the mainland to that tower was about 30 feet across, with about 400 feet of space below us. And I'll not forget, they had me go first because I couldn't see. Why not have the blind guy be the guinea pig? And then the guy behind me coming across, he kind of laughed. He said, there's got to be advantages at times of not being able to see. But, as I think about that, the cool thing about that trip to me was you had the mainland, if you will, in my mind, being the norm, everybody. And you had this tower over here being me. And these people were willing to stretch a rope across and come over here and join it and see things from my perspective, if you will. And we got over to a place that's called Monkey Face. And then we climbed the rest of that tower and rappelled off the back side of it. But we did it. We did it. And then along with the rock climbing and the mountaineering, I got into the kayaking. As you heard in the introduction, I was the first blind person to kayak the entire 226 miles of the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon in my own kayak. And it's taken me back to the Grand Canyon 3 more times. So I've done it 4 times now. And on my second trip down, I was joined by another gentleman who lost his eyesight, lost his as a child. And then the last trip down, I was joined by 4 other folks who lost their eyesight as a result of combat. And the trip before that, I was joined and guided by a gentleman who was missing both legs well above the knees, all 4 fingers on his left hand, his thumb and his outer 3 fingers on his right hand. And another gentleman who was suffering from a traumatic brain injury. And there's pictures of them now up there. But not only was this guy who was missing both legs above the knees guiding me through all the quote unquote hero lines or biggest rapids on the river, he was guiding me on all these side canyon hikes. Yeah. And there's a video up there now that's you can hear. There's a video up there now that's showing him guiding me on all these side canyon hikes. And it's crossed all these rocks and boulders and through these slots and sometimes we'd go several hundred feet above the canyon floor. And the entire time, here he was, just laughing and guiding me at the same time and saying, I love the challenge. And very seldom, but occasionally he just would say, hey, just give me a hand up. Then when I think about all 4 of those trips, if you were to take a picture of all of us after we jumped into our kayaks and put on our helmets, our life jackets, and our sunglasses and grabbed our paddles, if you'd look at that picture, you couldn't tell which one of us was blind, who had a traumatic brain injury, who was missing her legs. We looked like any other kayaker because of the simple fact we are kayakers. Oh, I think my screen froze here for a second.
Got it.
Oh, we're good again. Okay, sorry about that. But, the fact is, like I said, we're kayakers. And all 4 of those trips, we started at the same spot, a place called Lee's Ferry. And on the Grand Canyon, the rapids, they kind of build as you go along for the most part, with smaller rapids at the top, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger as you go along. And as I talk about this, there's going to be pictures of the Grand Canyon, and there's going to be videos of some of the rapids. And they're all pictures of me, and for the most part, going through these rapids. But we started, like I said, at Lee's Ferry. And we went through a rapid called Badger and around House Rock, and then through a section of rapids called the Roaring Twenties and another section called the Gems. We went around a rapid called Bedrock and through the Horns, split the Horns, these 2 towers sticking up out of the bottom of the canyon. Then we got to a rapid called Upset, which is where I took my very first swim on my first trip down. And it was rapid where it floated my spray skirt. And the spray skirt is a device that just wraps around your waist, and then it attaches to the cockpit to keep the water out of the cockpit of the kayak, to keep the water out of the kayak. So it flipped me upside down and imploded that spray skirt. So I took my first swim. And then we paddled on down to the most well-known rapid on the river called Lava Falls. And it's the only rapid that I actually saw. And I saw it on a television show called Wild World of Sports when I was a teenager. And it showed this raft dropping into the rapid and catching the edge of this massive hole. It's called a ledge hole on top of the rapid. It's a great big huge hole the size of about 2 Greyhound buses. Water just churns in it. But it showed this raft dropping in, catching the edge of that hole, causing the raft to flip end over end, and the people in the rigging went flying everywhere. And on my first trip down, I wanted to miss that hole. So we went a little bit too far to the right, and we got into this boiling water, just like water you'd boil on your kitchen stove. It's these bubbles just come up, and it causes you to get unstable. And it flipped me upside down. I rolled back up, and then it flipped me again. Only that time it jerked me out of the kayak so violently that I thought it literally took my legs off. And I can remember as I was flipping and spinning under the water, I reached down and to feel to make sure that I had my legs. And while I was flipping under the water, they told me my kayak was 20, 30 feet up in the air doing the same thing. So on that third trip down, where I was guided by the guy missing his legs, me and him didn't get out and scout the rapid or look it over. Naturally, it wouldn't do me any good anyway, but he didn't get to either. So the other guy, my other guy, took the lead. We dropped in, we split that ledge hole on our left and that boiling water on our right, and dropped into what they call the V wave. And it had these 2 lateral waves on each side. And we drove a little too far to our left, and that wave come over and hit me, almost flipping me over. But I was able to throw my paddle down in the water and hold the brace to keep from rolling over. But it slowed me down so much, I lost my guide out in front of me. He's just simply out in front of me yelling, hop up, hop up. So the other guy come flying around me. He said, I got you, Lonnie, I got you. He said, on me, charge, charge. As we just crashed through those massive waves down below. And we did it so good that we hiked up and carried our kayaks up, and we ran it again with the other guy taking the lead first, and we nailed it. We ran it perfectly. So then we paddled on down the river and we got to a rapid at mile 205. And I'll not forget, on my first trip down, mile 205, that rapid's much smaller rapid. It's only got probably 6 to 8, maybe 10-foot breaking waves in it. And they told me I had a perfect line going through the rapid, but one of the waves broke back over on itself just as I was going over the peak. And it hit me in the face so hard, it snapped my glasses in half, launched me in the air, and backflipped me in the kayak. And the guide behind me, he said, that was cool, man. He said, I saw your back. I saw your top of your head. I saw you upside down in the air looking at me, which I told him, I said, man, I wasn't looking at you. Then he said, I saw the bottom of your kayak. You rolled on over, flipped up, and paddled on. I thought, yeah, you're right. But I'll never forget on that first trip, when we were sitting in camp for the very last night, the guys and all the guides, they were telling me, said, Lonnie, it's cool. We did it, and I told them the same thing. I said, guys, it is cool to say that we were the first to ever do this, but it's absolutely irrelevant and meaningless unless we can somehow find a way to pay it forward. And that's what big mission in my life right now is to do just that. To pay it forward and create opportunities for other people just like us. But then I'll not forget the next day, we got up and they took this little American flag, and there's a picture of this sitting here that you're going to see. They took a little American flag that we had. It was attached to a small piece of PVC pipe. And that flag, we had it flying off of one of our support rafts the entire way down the canyon. But they took that flag and they stuck it down the back of my life jacket. And I was honored enough to paddle the last 4 miles of the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon with all these other disabled veterans kayaking around me, guiding me down the river. But we did it. We did it. And the one thing, you know, when I think about all 4 of those trips and all of those folks, one thing that just amazed me, and I'll not forget it, and the fact that they all have in common is that they don't quit. They don't view a crossroads in life as a negative or a dead end. And I've got my arms in front of me in the shape of an X right now. They don't view it as a dead end, which the X is a sign on a dead end sign on a street sign, road sign. They view it as a positive. And what I did with my arms in front of me right now is I take and I shift it to a plus symbol. They view that crossroads in life as a positive or plus, a place where you have choices. Now, they don't dwell on what they lost. They focus on the gifts they still have, and they choose to live life, not exist it. And I think we all need to do that because we all have so many gifts and so much to offer. But when I think about, the Zambezi River, it's one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, or Victoria Falls, excuse me, is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, just like the Grand Canyon. And now there's going to be a series of photos of Victoria Falls and pictures of the Potomac Gorge, kayaking over there. But unlike the Grand Canyon, the Potomac Gorge section of the Zambezi River, the bigger rapids are up top and the smaller rapids are at the bottom. And the local people over there call Victoria Falls the smoke that thunders because of the massive roar and the mist that fills the air. And I can, like I said, naturally, I cannot tell you about the mist, but I can definitely assure you that of the massive roar. But since we hadn't kayaked together over there, we decided to hike into that gorge and run those smaller rapids at the lower section first. So we did that, and then we kept working our way up. And the second day we hiked in a little bit higher and run some of the rapids. But before I went over there, they told me, said, Lonnie, we probably won't run rapids 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. They named off several of them like that. But that's okay. But after running the lower section and the middle section, we decided to go all the way to the top with rapid number 1. And we ran through 1, 2, and 3, and we got to rapid number 4. And I'll not forget, I dropped into rapid number 4, and I got flipped upside down and shoved over upside down against the wall in this recirculating eddy. And I couldn't roll, pinned against the wall upside down. I started to reach up and just ejected myself out of that kayak. But I thought, no, not yet, not yet. You've only got 1 more rapid to run, and you will have run everything you could possibly run and everything they didn't think that we would do. So I grabbed my paddle with both hands and I started prying on the wall. Unfortunately, I didn't start moving, but when I did, it was the wrong way. It was back upstream instead of downstream. And I got recirculated or spun around out into that eddy. Luckily, managed to just get my head up above the water just enough to just get a little gasp of air before I was pinned upside down against the wall a second time. Took my paddle and started prying on the wall again. Finally, and thankfully, I was flushed downstream where I was able to roll up, just gasping for air. And then I had that 1 more rapid to run. rapid number 5. And I was supposed to make this left to right move underneath this pour over. And a pour over is where you have this big rock or ledge in the middle of the river. The water just rushes over it. And on the backside of it creates a big churning hole. Well, I was supposed to go down, under, and around it, but I pushed too hard and too fast to the right, and I went flying over that pour over. Went airborne, landed it, and probably made one of the best runs I've ever made in my life before we paddled on downstream through all the rapids we'd already ran. And I'll never forget too, I'll think about a little funny story of the Zambezi River. When I went over there, they told me, they said, Lonnie said, if a crocodile comes out at you, said what you're supposed to do is paddle straight at it. And then when it dives under the water, getting to prepare to make its attack, then you turn 90 degrees to the right or left and paddle away from it. In my mind, I was sitting there thinking, yeah, and you guys are going to tell me when to turn, and the only person you have to out paddle is the blind guy. So, and we did see a few crocodiles, but nothing big and no concerns. But after we completed paddling the rest of those rapids, it's then that I got into that conversation with that Zambian man. And I am convinced, had he not seen us flying over that pour over, and the simple fact that he insisted that I know, he was able to refocus his mind and see someone like us from another perspective. I would never have heard those words. And I have been fortunate enough now to be told that after that, they started teaching the blind over there. And they no longer have them stand on the corner and beg. They're teaching them to garden and to build, among other things. So you tell me that each and every one of us can't make a difference. One person can't make a difference. I truly believe that I am so fortunate, and we are so fortunate to live in a country where there's organizations like Vision Loss Alliance that believes in us, that provides opportunities for us, and lets us realize what is possible. Adversity, I think about that, all these rivers and streams and mountains, they're so much like our lives. As you travel along the rivers or the mountains, the path ahead isn't always calm or straight, and you can't see around the bend to know what's coming next. All of a sudden, it's just this chaos. The terrain gets steeper, more rugged, a storm blows in, or the current picks up, and there's obstacles everywhere you have to avoid. We've just been hit by life's adversity. A bad day at work or at school, or illness or injury, or the unfortunate passing of a loved one, or maybe we simply chose the wrong path before we realized it. But just as sure as those mountains and rivers rise and fall, adversity is going to find us. So no matter how big or how small it is, we can't quit. We can't quit. Or, we might get trapped or swept away. And the world is still there and life is just passing us by. So I think the way we handle it, no matter how big or how small that adversity is, we have to break it down. The hardest part is always acknowledging it, acknowledging where we're at. And it's real. And realizing that, and I think about this, and I'm going to describe this to you guys. How do you spell adversity? ADVERSITY. But acknowledging those differences and difficulties. Once we do that, it empowers us, to visualize every route we can take, and it's like the first step up a mountain might seem overwhelming, or first paddle stroke through a rapid, it might seem overwhelming. But once you take it, it does. It gives you the power to visualize every route you might take, the strength, the S to do what my daughter said, to stand up and step or take a stroke, to where the ITY into you, your future, our future, the things we can do, the differences we can make, the life we can live. And I think about that, so, my final thoughts to all of you, if you will, is, when that adversity does hit you, if it causes, our vision to get a little more dark, a little more cloudy, or seems overwhelming, we just have to take a breath, let it go, refocus our minds. I want you to think about, the influence of a 5-year-old little girl, the innovative use of a cowbell, the vision of a man who can't see or hear, the trust of some rock climbers, the tenacity of a bunch of disabled kayakers, and then never ever quit as we expand our vision, realize the value and impact we have in this world, and continue to make it a better place, because you do and you can. And for that, I thank you all. And that's my presentation. And thank you, guys.
I'd like to open the floor to questions or comments.
Yeah. Yeah, well, maybe.
Anyone?
You use some of that reggae oil?
Henry, you have a comment?
Fantastic presentation and phenomenal. Lonnie, you're wonderful.
Well, thank you, guys. Thank you.
I've got two questions. If
Go ahead, Ken.
one is two sort of practical questions, I guess. One, I am seeing you mountain climbing and going up those ropes and everything. I'm just wondering how many pull-ups you do. Do you have to be able to do like 1 million pull-ups to be able to do that? How does that work in terms of condition?
Good question.
Well, I do try to stay in shape, but actually I don't have a means of doing pull-up. I have a little total gym down here where I can do some of that, but it's just a lot of routine in here on the floor, doing calisthenics, sit-ups, push-ups, a little bit of free weight stuff. And I go out here on walks, where I live out here in the country. I'm fortunate enough I can go out here and walk and run a 7.5 mile loop out here past 3 houses on the way. And I personally put a trekking pole in each hand and just go along, and my biggest concern is parked cars and roadkill. But
Well, it's definitely always good to stay in shape, and it looks like you're doing that. Second question is related to all the stuff you're doing in the rapids, and not just Victoria Falls, but just the giant amount of noise out there. How easy or hard was it to communicate or what anybody was telling you in terms of direction or giving you a heads up on anything coming up? How how did that go, especially in the parts?
It truly is amazing how much you can hear in the middle of those rapids. Typically, the noisiest part is right at the top when you're first dropping in. And these guys, they're yelling at the top of their lungs, hop, hop, like I said, turn right. And they're paddling just, a few feet away from me. How they do it, I have no idea. How they can run sideways, sometimes backwards, and still guide me at the same time. But there are those times when I do lose their sound. And when that happens, I just keep paddling. I just keep charging on and paddling on. But it's amazing once you kind of drop in, how you can hear them, turn right, give me a 2 o'clock bow angle, now paddle hard, now charge. And, as you get closer to features, it gets noisier. But by then, and they're not describing everything to me. They're just giving me directions to get through. And, then after we run it, for me personally, I tell them, don't tell me what I have to avoid. Once we get through the rapid, tell me what we missed, and because they can't. It just happened so fast, so quick. They couldn't describe it all anyway. So that's
what about like you know, if you must be next to other people who, you know, like they're giving you directions or they're giving the other person directions and you're not sure whether it's for you or for them. How does that work out?
Well, if it's the other blind folks coming around, we separate ourselves enough to where I can't hear their team giving them commands and they can't hear mine giving me commands.
Okay, that's good. 2 questions. Thanks very much. I think the whole thing is really cool.
Thank you.
This is awesome. Lonnie, actually, I have a question. It's Linda. I want to ask you how you deal with the altitude.
You know, so far, you know, knock on wood, I've done well with it, you know, and you never know how it's going to come about. You know, we climb slow, if you will, and we, you know, stop like on Mount Kilimanjaro. We took 5.5 days to climb it. And on Aconcagua, I think we took 7.5 or 8 days to climb up. And then, you know, descending, we descend a lot faster. But, and why you do that is you give your body time to acclimate to the elevation. And, but you know, the higher you go, the less you want to eat. And, you know, you tend to maybe get headaches. And,
Right.
and I was on Aconcagua, I was climbing one of my guides who's climbed all over the world. We got up to 19,000 feet and they had to go back down because for the first time ever, they got altitude sickness. And so they didn't get a summit.
Thank you. We have another question. Paul, you have a question?
Yes,
I see your hand too, Ashley. Paul, you're first up. Paul.
Thank you very much. Lonnie, I really appreciate you sharing your story with us and found it inspirational on so many levels. And sight or no sight, there's, I don't think I'm going to be doing a lot of the things you've done, but one of the things that you have done that I, you know, have done for a living is writing. And I wanted to kind of find out, how did you find the experience without your sight of writing a book?
Well, for me, you know, I'll tell you kind of how I did it to begin with. Is I personally dictated the book, if you will, and I had a ghostwriter initially put it into print and then send it back to me. And then I spent about 9 months going through it with my JAWS program, you know, editing it. And, you know, it was challenging. It was challenging because, you know, you make an edit and think, okay, I got it right. And then you go listen to it again, and then think, man, I screwed it up worse than it was. But, yeah, and that was one of the most challenging things I've done, to be quite honest with you. And I couldn't have done it without the help of the ghostwriter. But you know, quite honestly, the ghostwriter, when he did it, he embellished it a lot. You know, and put in some things that, you know, language and stuff that I wouldn't use, you know, the way I wouldn't use it, not like it was bad language, but, and I spent a lot of time, if you will, lack of better terms, dumbing it back down, because I'm a very simple person, with very simple means and stuff. And you know, he's like, you can't do that. You know, it doesn't sound as good. And I told him, I said, it's going to be what it is, or it's not going to be. And,
Your voice,
you know, the cool thing to me, though, that that book became an Amazon bestseller. And they flew me out to California to receive a Quilly Award on a red carpet for being the
Everything is super challenging. I need a case manager, some support, resources.
Sorry, we just had to mute someone. I'm sorry. Continue, Lonnie.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, but it's cool. But there are the means out there, you know, for people to do it, and we can do it. You know, it's yeah.
Well, writing is hard no matter what the situation is, and everything, you know. But I appreciate you sharing your perspective with me and your experience. And I just want to say thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you. You know, to me, it was an honor to be able to do that, to serve, and I view this stuff now kind of as part of that same thing. You know, I do the things I do, you know, for much, like I said in the thing, it's much more than me standing on the mountain or kayaking a river, you know, or doing any of it. It's with a passion and desire, not only for those of us who are blind or visually impaired, but for everyone to realize, you know, their potential, how much more we all can do if we believe in each other. And like me, I've just been blessed with opportunity. That's the one thing with me, that I've just been blessed beyond belief with opportunity and people that believe in me and give me those chances and opportunities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We have, I know we had Ashley that had her hand raised. We have quite a few hands, so be patient, everyone. Ashley? Okay, next up we'll have Alicia. Alicia. Oh,
Oh, are you asking me to ask my question?
yes, Alicia.
Okay. Yeah, I also wanted to thank you for your service, and your story was very inspiring. And everything that you do, that you talked about, was very inspiring, and it's kind of similar to my story. So my question is, I don't know if you've ever been there, because I'm visually impaired, but I haven't always been visually impaired. It's been maybe like 5 years, but I'm still trying not to let it kind of like get in my way. So I'm trying to still push myself to still do things that I want to do, because I still want to be like an active and adventurous person. So like I used to go swimming and I used to be very active, and I've noticed that I've like cut back on that a little bit, and I'm trying to push back a little bit against that barrier to like push myself forward and to start back doing those things that I used to do. So I'm just like wondering, like, have you ever had like that barrier that you had to push through to like get you to where you are?
Of course I did. Yeah, of course I did. And it's like I said, the thing where I was so fortunate is that incident I talked about mowing with my daughters. It happened so quickly, you know, just 2 months after I lost my eyesight, and literally, you know, that put my feet back under me. And to begin with, all these adults were saying no, no, no. My girls were saying go, go, go. And when everybody's seen, well, he and these girls are going to do this, so we better jump on board, because these girls don't have a clue really how to do things safely, but between him and their dad, they're going to do it. And so, you know, it's like I said earlier, to me, the three emotions I think hold us back more than any is that foolish pride, fear, and pity. You know, foolish pride, I kind of described it earlier. You know, there's nothing wrong with being proud of yourself, but when it gets to the point where you can't humble yourself to ask for that hand up, then it's foolish pride. I don't care who you are in life. Everybody needs a hand up every now and then, everybody. And that leads into the fear, F-E-A-R, false evidence about reality. Oh, I'm not a man if I need to ask for help. They're going to make fun of me. They're going to think I'm weak. They're going to think I'm useless. They're going to think I'm, no, that's not true. Most people out here would love to help you and help us. They truly do. And it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't, you know, and that leads into the worst part of all, I think, is the pity, P-I-T-Y. I like to say is poor information to yourself. I'm useless because I'm blind. I'm not a man because I'm blind. I'm not this because that's not at all true. Absolutely not the case. You know, we've just been put in situations where our normal is different. Every single one of us has extreme value, extreme worth, and we have to realize that. And I truly told my daughters growing up, even after I lost my eyesight, and I still do this on occasion. I should do it daily, but I tell them to go into the bathroom and look into the mirror and look at that person staring back at them, not at how disheveled their hair is or what their face looks like or their makeup or, you know, but tell that person standing there how you're amazing, you're awesome, you can, just everything positive, because that is the fact. That is the truth. And it is that getting out of our own way. We are our biggest obstacles most of the time. Sure, there's obstacles out there. We can't get in vehicles and take off and drive on our own. Obstacle. So how are we going to get from point A to point B? We have to figure that out. You know, there are those obstacles in our lives, but everybody has obstacles in their lives. And I find myself anymore, a lot of times, you know, I'll be out here doing something, you know, like, for example, I remember going out here replacing a strut on my car. And when I was in there, I hit a point and I was like, dang it, if I could just see it. Well, I've got to the point now personally in my life, whenever that dang it, if I could just see it comes into my mind, especially if I'm there by myself, I stop and think, okay, when you could see, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do this, it wasn't your gift. I was never going to be a professional baseball player, professional athlete, a singer, an artist. I couldn't, there's things I was always a small guy, I couldn't do. Wasn't my gift. So what now I say, focus on your gift, Lonnie. Slow down and try to figure out a way to do it yourself, or simply do what you know you need to do. Ask. Break out your phone, FaceTime someone and say, hey, can you see that? What do I need to do here next? Hey, thanks. You know, just whatever it is. But the entire time, even though there's those frustrations, it's still saying, okay, Lonnie, you've got value. You got purpose. There's people that need you just as much as you need them. And, you know, but also to go back to your point, you know, there's a lot of programs out there. I've got a friend down in Florida that religiously swims, and one out in California, as a matter of fact. They're both blind. One's totally blind and one is kind of visually impaired, if you will. And, you know, they team up with someone out there with a little, you know, one swims with a little, like they do running, with a little lanyard. Another one has a little rope, if you will, kind of a bungee stretchy off the back of their guide swimmer, and they swim off the noise and a little bit of feel sometimes to that bungee. And then, you know, then they also take, you know, I told them, like I do with kayaking, I take a little portable speaker or radio and take my iPhone and tune into that waterproof speaker, and I set it out there on the bank, and I just paddle away from it, paddle back to it, or swim away from it and swim back to it. And so they take on the end of the pool and they take two different radios or speakers and play sound. They just swim back and forth on their own. And so there's ways to overcome, and adaptive sports everywhere for all of you guys. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm getting way long-winded. I know there's a lot more questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. Aaron, you can ask your question.
Did your family still like love you and support you, or did they just like look at you as like an outcast and stop acknowledging you?
They absolutely support me. You know, there was a few people out there that, if you will, kind of walked away from me when I lost my eyesight. And some of them have come back, some of them haven't. But, you know, I can't control that. I'm very, very fortunate, you know, like I said, my kids, to me, no matter my greatest achievement in my life, no matter what mountain I climb, what river I kayak, whatever I do, my greatest achievement is the fact that I raised those 3 girls, and they'll all give me a hug and say, I love you, Daddy. You know, and there might be times they're just like any kid, they get a little frustrated at me or whatever, but
Yeah.
no, it's not. Yeah. But there was a good friend of mine, for example, I remember, you know, he wouldn't come around, and I went down to his house, and he's a big guy. He's a real big guy, 6'2", 6'3", big guy. And I said, why aren't you coming around? And he said, I just don't know what to do. I don't know what to do anymore, Lonnie. And I reached up and grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, you know, because I could hear his voice. I knew where his shirt was at. And I just grabbed him. I pulled him down to me, and I shook him a little bit. And I said, look, I said, I'm the same person I always was, only I can't see. You will treat me, talk to me, act around me exactly the same way you always did. And the rest of it we'll figure out. You got it? And he started crying. He said, yeah. And to this day now, we're good friends. But to your point, people, there's one thing I tell people a lot, all the time. We cannot hold people accountable for what they don't know or don't understand. So being blind, a lot of times we're the first blind person we've ever known. And a lot of times the people around us, we are the first blind person they've ever known. So it is, in my opinion, it is our responsibility to teach them long before I can hold them accountable for something they don't understand. Now, once I teach them, then I have every right to hold them accountable, you know. But, you know, there's people out there they'll get like, well, you know, I don't like their comment. I don't like this. I don't like that. Well, do they know? Do they understand? And until I tell them, they might not. So I truly believe, you know, we have a lot of times that harder battle, maybe, but it's difficult for them too. Believe me, we just might not understand it because we're so focused on ourselves. We might not understand the battle they're going through. So once again, I think somehow we have to draw in that strength within us to take the time to educate as we're going along. And not take offense to it while we're doing so.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a great point. Olga, you have a question.
Yeah, well, first of all, I enjoyed your presentation. And I first of all want to say, you mean you really raised your daughters all on your own? Didn't you not get any help? Did you really do it all by yourself?
Oh yeah, there's people around that would help and come here and there, sure. But it's me and those 3 girls in this house right here by ourselves.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I taught them how to cook. You know, like I said, taught them how to cook, do laundry, clean, you know, how to play sports. You know, I remember being a coach on their softball teams, assistant coach on their teams, and got a bell with bounce plates, taught them how to play basketball, how to shoot bow and arrow and guns, and yeah.
That is amazing. Wow, good for you. That's amazing. And then I was thinking, I have 2, well, my nieces are adults, but I remember when they were younger, and the one, they could sense that I had problems, I think, because the older one, first of all, she kind of looked at my eyes, and then the younger one time said, she was asking something, pointing to something, it's over there. And I said, what do you mean? And she said to me, you mean you can't see? And I said, right, I cannot see. And she said, oh, and she was 4 at that time. So sometimes kids have a real sensitivity to people that have problems.
Yeah.
You know?
I think more so. I love children because of their innocence.
Yeah.
And
I think when your 5-year-old daughter was like, she was really sensitive, just like when my younger niece asked me, she was 4 at that time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And I got grandkids now, you know, and it's, yeah, there's 11 of them out there, you know, and
Wow. Hey, good for you. Congratulations. That's
and
really
they're
great.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, you're amazing too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Olga. Do we have any other questions or comments? Oh, Lisa.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. You know, you just said something that really resonated with me. It's you said sometimes we're so focused on our own battles that we sometimes miss seeing the struggles that other people are having around us. Would you be able to speak to that in your journey? I am a single person, and to live a life with low vision, there's a lot that is consuming. Things just take longer, but I have noticed this, and I just thought it was a really insightful thing. So I didn't know if you could elaborate on that, how that functions, or how you are able to, in the midst of parenting and doing all of that. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
You're fine. Yeah, and to me, it's I'm so acquainted with so many nonprofits around, and you know, that take people out doing things, and I'm kind of going to give I think a long answer here to that, but you know, and I encourage them to not only bring the blind or visually impaired or disabled athlete, whatever it is, solely with them all the time. I encourage them to truly bring their families and their caregivers, because if we go by ourselves all the time, sure, we're going to gain from it, no doubt. But if our caregivers can come along and see what not only we are capable of doing, but watch all these other people, then it gains knowledge for them and what they can do, and oh, I can help, or we can do so much more than I thought we could. But also along the same lines, as when I think back about the family, it doesn't just, blindness didn't just happen to me. It happened to everybody around me.
Right.
It affected my children. It affected everybody. And so, you know, I try to encourage now when I talk about it, and I get the opportunity to talk to families, is I'll tell their caregivers or loved ones, I said, don't you dismiss what you're going through as well. While you're trying to find and get help for us, please go find and get help for yourself, because you've got all this additional responsibility, if you will, or at least different responsibility. And sometimes that's all it's going to be. Sometimes it is additional. Sometimes it's just going to be different, because, you know, and then you get help and you get the attention you need, because the attention I used to give you right now, or before, I might not be able to give to you. So you need that. We all need that special care, that special feeling. So, you know, as you go get the help, you get into whatever it is, and let's focus on you for a little bit instead of just on me. And then, you know, then that also will bring up the questions. Okay, well, you're trying to struggle with this. I didn't know that was a struggle for you unless you let me know about it. So it's getting those dialogues going and letting them know, I realize this is hard for you as well. Now, why? What part of this are you struggling with? You know, simply how to arrange. I don't know how to arrange this to make it better for you, Dad. You know, I don't know how to arrange the house to make it better for you, and that's killing me. Well, let me show you how this will help me, but yet how can it be still functionable for you? And you know, and yet you need a break from me. That's fine. You can't. There's nothing wrong with saying I need a break. We all do. That's why I said a lot of times it's no different than anyone else.
Right.
We need a break from the situation we're in.
Right.
So take that break, get that help, get that guidance. And once again, this goes to that education piece I was talking about. And it's truly, they don't know what I don't tell them. I don't know what they don't tell me. We don't know. And I don't know if that answers the question to you enough.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And please, and like I said, and please tell, to me, that's all of us, we all need to let our loved ones, our caregivers know that is,
right.
Yeah. Just communication all around.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But in saying so, like I said, the one thing, guys, if I ever say anything through all this, and I go around talking to schools a lot, to high schools and middle schools, and once again to those kids, but it's the same for everybody. The one thing I tell them is it starts kind of like we're all different. And that's what makes this such an amazing place. Everybody on the planet has this unique set of gifts that only they have. We share similar gifts with other people, but there's no one on the planet that has this unique bundle of gifts that each one of us individually has. And that's what makes us so extremely valuable. And we just got to focus on our gifts. There's a quote out there, and I don't know who wrote it. It says, and I'm probably going to paraphrase a little bit. It says, comparison is the thief of joy. By comparing what we do have or don't have, or can do or can't do, to what others do have or can do, we're robbing ourselves of our own gifts and therefore of our own joy. So what we need to do is take and look at this little basket of gifts that we have and focus on our gifts. And they will change. Every person alive, those gifts will change as they go throughout their life, simply due to living and life experiences, age, whatever it is, blindness, whatever it is, but yet we focus on the gifts. We're still here. We still have. And we use those to be valued to us and to others, and I've truly gotten the mindset too that, that comparison thing is I look at, think if it wasn't for the gifts that you have to give to me, then what would I be missing out on? If, for example, the mechanic, who's going to be the mechanic, the doctor, the lawyer, the teacher, the farmer, just name it, name it. They got these gifts and their gifts are my gifts, and another point I always told my daughters growing up, and I think it's extremely important for all of us to realize and continue to do, is I tell my daughters, I said, just think of yourself as a lighthouse. The only thing that you truly can control is how bright you shine your light. Everybody out there at the helm or captain of their own ship. They can see this lighthouse and they can either come to it, go away from it, whatever they want to do. But it's their choice. They're at the helm of their ship. You cannot control where they're going to turn that ship to. You have no control, none over that. The only thing you can control is how bright you shine that light. And I think we all need to do that. Like I said, that goes back to that focusing on your gifts and realizing and believing, like I said, to these kids, your value You are valuable. You're extremely important. And you have a purpose. And believe in yourself. It has to start there. Anyone else got a question?
Any other questions or comments? So, Mr. Lonnie Bedwell, and on behalf of Vision Loss Alliance and our program participants that joined us here tonight, we thank you for sharing your emotional journey and amazing adventures with us. You are truly an inspiration to all of us. And we thank you for being with us. And most of all, we thank you too for your service to our country.
Well, thank you all. It's like I said, it's truly an honor and a privilege to be here tonight and for you guys to listen and yeah, be a part of it. It's an honor and a privilege to me and to have served the country both. But thank you. I sincerely mean that.
It was beautiful. Thank you very much for being with us.
And please, too, I want to put this out there. If any of you guys ever want to reach out for anything else, feel free. Reach out to me anytime. And if I'm not out doing some adventure, I will get back to you quickly. If I'm out, like I'm going to be out climbing Denali in June, you try to reach a hold of me in June and think, oh, he didn't get back to me. Well, that's because I'm gone for a month, but I will get back to you.
You keep us posted on your journeys too and your adventures. Definitely let us know. We'll follow you.
Yeah, you can follow along with that. Yeah, you can kind of follow along with my Facebook page. I got a Facebook page. I put a lot of it out there. And there's a website we created called Sightless Summits. And as we go up Denali, we're literally going to have a GPS tracking thing that's kind of going to track us as we go up the mountain. They'll update. I don't know how many times a day it'll update. And I'm going to put a little word out there or something on how we're doing, and our thoughts and emotions as we go along. Yeah, you can follow that. Anyway, once again, thank you all so much. What an honor.
We thank you as well. And good luck with your next journey.
Yeah.
Good luck, Lonnie.
Take care. I
thank everyone for joining us. And we wish you all a good night and you stay well.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Thank you again, Lonnie. It was fantastic.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.